So did you guys see my 5-point outline of the topic I'm doing?
I did see that, and I guess my first thought, here comes a J symposium.
Welcome to Drunk Real Estate.
Grab a drink and enjoy the show.
Hey there, welcome to episode 106 of Drunk Real Estate. I am Kyle Wilson, Ashley Wilson's husband, and I'm joined by my co-host, AJ Mauricio. How's it going, guys? Cheers.
Cheers. Hey.
We got a great episode for you right now. We went through a couple weeks of slow news, and so we mixed in our predictions episode, but this week was just crazy. What we had CPI, then we had a Fed meeting, and then we had a jobs report, which is what we're going to talk about today, because everyone kind of already forgot that we had a Fed meeting and a inflation report, because a lot has happened with this jobs report. What's been going on here, Jay?
So, the jobs report was interesting, and then the aftermath and the fallout of the jobs report was probably even more interesting. But let's, start with the data. We got July jobs data, which 73,000 jobs created in July, relatively weak number. But the more concerning issue was that we also got revisions of the May and the June data. And Kyle, since you've enjoyed doing this for the last couple of years now, I'm going to give you one guess of which direction the data was revised.
You know what? I looked at this and I'm thinking this whole job section, I've said enough. I'm just gonna sit here and bask in my glory of me calling this for like a year, saying how jobs reports are and how the data is awful, and then all of a sudden it was just like one bad jobs report that showed that, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, this has been all like, what's going on with this jobs report?" And I'm just like, "You guys serious? Like, really? This is like it wasn't that hard to see." So anyway, like I don't even feel like I have to say anything this segment. I'll just let you guys just reaffirm everything I've already said.
That was a lot of words not to say anything. Okay, so the revisions that we saw were, much like we've seen over the last couple of years, very large and very downward. May was revised downward from 144,000 jobs to 19,000 jobs. June was revised down from 147,000 jobs to 14,000 jobs. So basically between those 2 months, we revised down from about 300,000 to about 33,000.
And how much of that was healthcare?
A lot of it was healthcare.
When you say a lot, you mean all of it, right?
All of it. Yeah. All of it was healthcare.
Okay.
So basically, long story short, the last 3 months of jobs data was the worst 3 months of jobs data we've seen, other than COVID, since 2010. So it was pretty horrendous. And so it also kind of kicked off a frenzy from the executive branch. President wasn't happy about the revisions down. I'm surprised it took him by surprise, simply because we saw the same thing during Biden. We saw the same thing in his first term in 2018. We've seen massive revisions under Obama. So it's not like it's the first time that's happened, but he freaked out and he fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is the organization responsible for putting out the jobs data, basically saying that the woman that ran the agency is manipulating data and trying to make him look bad, et cetera, et cetera. So long story short, we got some really bad data over the last couple months, and we saw Trump fire the head of the statistics organization that was responsible for reporting that data. And this is, I think, where things start to get interesting.
And it's weird because the firing of the BLS person seems to be putting everything under a microscope. And in the past, it's like they do these revisions and the market generally like shrugs it off, which is interesting and weird, because if you had these numbers actually reported like they were, the market would have freaked out 2 months ago or a month ago. And if that happens moving forward, it's almost like this revisions was helping the market to smooth things over. Now moving forward, it's going to be interesting to see. Well, it's going to be interesting what kind of data we get, if it's going to be any different than before, whether it's the BLS person that's the problem, or is it the way they actually gather the statistics that's the problem, which I think is more the latter than the actual individual. But everybody's now putting a spotlight on this, so everybody's now really going to be focusing on the revisions.
the revisions were massive. These weren't like anything that we've ever seen. These were bigger than COVID revisions. These were over 800,000.
This was the second highest revision, and the only, can you guess when the highest revision was?
2008 or 9.
2020. So it was the COVID revision was the only revision that was more than this.
And to put that in perspective too, how much different it is. We're talking about from 2015 to 23, the adjustments are typically 0.1% or less. This was 0.5, like astronomically off the charts.
Well, one more perspective too. If it was revised by 133,000 jobs, that still would have been the top 5 of all time.
Yeah, this was so crazy that in a normal time they could be so far off. Like, it's shocking.
It is shocking, but imagine, I mean, when the news came out last month where they had 147,000 jobs, it was like, oh, it's, can you imagine if they'd come out and said, we're expecting, I don't know what the expectation was when they did the 147, but it was either a little bit less or a little bit more. And if they had come out with 14,000 jobs, that would have been a huge reaction. It may have even affected the Fed's decision, because then you would have gotten the signal a lot sooner that the market isn't, the employment data isn't as strong as the Fed is at least saying it is. And there would be a good argument to be made that had this data been accurate from 2 months ago and then last month, that the Fed may have moved. And maybe that's why Trump's a little upset, because they think, hey, if these had been accurate, at least the Fed may have already started.
The Fed
dropping.
used employment as one of the main reasons they weren't changing it. They said, we have a robust employment landscape. That's one of the major drivers of the Fed's decision.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about this, obviously, because, well, here, I don't want to immediately give Trump a win here on this by saying, like, this has been a long time coming. We need changes in jobs, because obviously I've been banging that drum for over a year. This is a good start, like, to shake things up. Did she deserve to be fired? I think she's only been there for like a year, right? And she was very bipartisan. JD Vance and Marco Rubio both voted for her to come in, and so it wasn't like it's like a Democrat like who's trying to over Trump. But at the same time, let me just read you the last 2 jobs reports. So this isn't like Trump has been saying like oh, this girl's been doing a bad job. Let me just read the last 2 releases from the White House from the last 2 jobs reports. So in April, so for the March jobs reports, he tweeted, "Great jobs numbers, far better than expected. It's already working. Hang tough. We can't lose." It's the same people who released those job numbers. It's the same thing with revisions. They're doing the same, basically the exact same thing. The month after that, it said, "Today's jobs report reveals Biden's economy was far worse than anyone thought and underscores the necessity of," this one, pro-growth policies. So, like, I guess the point is that the previous jobs reports, like, he was saying these are great reports, and he had no problem with the way they were doing things. He had no problem with what was happening. And so
that's because we didn't know they were wrong by over 800,000 people.
And why didn't, but they did. They didn't know it was by this much. But as we said, when they released those reports, they revised the previous ones. And both of those reports revised previous ones down. And if you look back, it's what, 13 of or it was like 15 of the last 18. They're all been revised down. And some of them have been very significant, not to this level, but very significant. And if you look back to last August when they did the yearly catch up, when it was like 800,000, that they revised it down. So, like, it's not like this is like, it shouldn't be shocking.
It's during a key, like, let's just putting aside whether you think Trump's doing a good job, a bad job, whether you agree or disagree. You think of Trump making these major decisions, right? International tariff decisions. These are all based on what the data he's getting. So he's getting these robust data numbers. He's like, oh, this is working. We continue. The plan continues because everything's going right, versus had he gotten the correct data, he may not have negotiated things a certain way. Like that affects the way you're negotiating and getting some.
But this is a failure on their part too, on the administrations, where they shouldn't be looking at headline jobs. But I don't even think we should be releasing headline jobs 1 month after. Like, if you look at this, it is such an inconsistent data point. It's literally useless. Like, I don't know why people even report it.
The problem, though, is, which I completely agree with you on that, but there's a difference between 0.1 and 5, and that's 5x. Like, think if you were off, like, in general, you went 5 times worse off.
Yeah,
Like,
but like you're acting like they've acted say like, oh, these are final numbers. They come right out and say, hey, like our response rate's super low, and we're basing this off of, you know, they basically like, we're doing the best we can with these releases. We're gonna have to revise them significantly.
exactly. And we know that. But like when you say the norm is 0.1 to 0.5, and then you come out and the only time you can even get close was during a year of COVID, you take that out, right? 2020 out, and nothing even comes close to this.
Well, so let me offer an alternative viewpoint here. Maybe there's a reason why we tend to see large revisions during times of massive economic turmoil. We saw large revisions around 2008. We saw large revisions around 2020. We're seeing large revisions around now. So maybe it's not that the data's bad, but maybe there's actually a factor that leads us to get large revisions during certain points in the economic cycle. And if you understand how the data is collected, that actually makes sense. So the way they collect the data, first of all, they call it preliminary estimates. And we've known this for 30 years that the monthly data is not tremendously good data, but there's a reason why they release it, and that's because for a lot of people who use this data, timeliness is more important than accuracy. The Fed uses this data, so even if it's right or close 60% of the time, that's better than not having the data. Businesses use this data. Economists use this data. Lots of people use this data. And so they've made the decision over the last 30, 40 years that timeliness is more important than accuracy. And so releasing preliminary data on a monthly basis with the caveat that this is preliminary data is better than not releasing the data at all. And the way it works is they send out surveys to households, they send out surveys to businesses, and they get surveys back. And in that first month, they get surveys back and they release the data as the monthly data. Now, the problem is they don't get nearly all of the data back in the first month. There's a lot of households that don't respond. Household response is very low these days, but even business response, 70% of businesses respond in that first month, but 30% of businesses, and we're talking 160,000 businesses, that's still 50,000 businesses that don't respond until the second or the third month. And so it's not that the BLS is putting out bad data. It's not that they're misinterpreting the data. It's that they just haven't collected enough of it. So they put as much data as they can the first month. And then the second month, they get more data. And the third month, they get more data and they do revisions and they say, here's more accurate data based on the new surveys we've gotten. But here's the thing. If the market is going down, if the economy is softening, if people are losing jobs, let's say somebody gets a job offer in June and then before they start, it gets rescinded in July. What do you expect to happen with the data? In that situation, you expect that the surveys that come in later are going to look much worse than the surveys that came in earlier because the market is dissolving. Likewise, or on the other side of the coin, if the market's getting stronger, like we saw in 2014, 2015, like we saw in 2021, 2022, we tend to see revisions upwards because when the data is revised after the second month or after the third month or after a year, things are getting better. And so surveys that come in later actually show us better data than the surveys that came in earlier, and we tend to see revisions upwards. And so it's not like it's not the tail wagging the dog here. It's not that we're seeing all these revisions and that means the data's bad. It's actually the revisions are telling us what's going on in the economy. Things are getting worse, so the revisions are getting worse. When things are getting better, the revisions get better. And that's, I mean, this is something, again, we've known for 40 years. And I think part of the problem is that people didn't really start paying attention to economics until COVID. Most people didn't take an economics course in high school or in college or pick up and read an economics textbook, but everybody looks at economics and data on the internet since 2020 and thinks they're an expert, and they don't realize that this stuff is not any different. Large revisions are part of history and part of what happens when we have tumultuous economies. And so, yeah, this isn't, in my opinion, this isn't necessarily an anomaly. And if you want to talk about who to blame, we can do that in a minute. We can talk about the role of the BLS Commissioner. The reality is the BLS Commissioner doesn't see the data until a day or two before the data is released, until the data is final. So it's not like the Commissioner has control over the data. They don't even know what the data looks like until a day or two before the data.
But they probably have control over the process and how you collect the data, I presume.
Of course, they absolutely have control over the process. And you could argue that this BLS commissioner, the previous one, all the ones back for the last 20 years should have been fired because they didn't revise how data was collected, that they didn't do their job in ensuring that data was going through a better collection.
I mean, have you guys ever received one of these surveys? Like, is it like fill in the box? I've never.
I as a business owner, I have. Yeah, I've received this a lot as a business owner.
And is it like, do you use like a number 2 pencil and you have to like circle the bubbles, or is it like an internet? Is it like ChatGPT?
Online.
You go online. Okay, so at least
Wait, no, Jay, I thought it was a phone survey.
No, not for businesses. For household, maybe. I've never gotten the household survey.
The whole thing on who to blame and who Trump's firing, I'm like, I don't really care about that. But I'm like, when we're talking about though the revisions of this and how massive that is completely a shift in the overall landscape. And I think when you look at, first of all, the hiring numbers, we had a big number last month that was unemployment rate amongst college grads. And so when you look for the first time ever, we had unemployment rates on college grads that were not a part or that was higher than the standard population. First time that's happened. And when they actually looked at why this would happen or why this is happening, the huge number that they got back was AI. So what they found was people were not hiring nearly as many college grads, and 2, the job openings were going down. When you looked at non-college grads, they didn't see that. So all of a sudden, you have a huge divergent that we've seen for the first time in the workforce. That is a big deal. And when you look at the growth of AI, it's playing a huge role in this. I mean, I know our firm is. We have,
but the other side of it, people who are trying to say, and there are some Fed commissioners that are saying this too, that like it's not that big a deal because like the unemployment rate barely changed, right? We're at 4.2. So
we are historically still low. Like if you look at the United States, our unemployment rate, our employment was a massive problem. We're still low. But I think what's a big deal is where it's at. That I think is a big deal. So the adjustments is huge and the change is huge. But overall, especially where we're at, employment was sky high. But where you're seeing it, that's wildly different than it's been in the past. That is not normal. You normally see college grads have low levels of unemployment. You see that being a robust market, and it's not.
You're also seeing a very low labor participation rate. That participation rate continues to go down. But what I find fascinating, what I wanted to just pivot a little bit, is that over the last week or ever since this came out, I've noticed that the spotlight on these numbers, I mean, nobody used to talk about this. Now everybody's talking about it. Everybody's on the spotlight. Everybody's starting to doubt the numbers and wondering whether we can trust these numbers. And then add to that, we're going to have a new, I don't even know, we're probably not going to have a new BLS in time. So there's an acting BLS, but like, what's the trust level on even the next round of numbers? If the numbers are great, do we say, hey, well, the numbers are great because, Trump put his own person in there. So these are now manipulated versus not being manipulated. Like, I feel like the spotlight has been huge on these things and the trust factor of whether people are going to believe these, whether the market's going to believe these numbers moving forward.
Depends on the premise, though. Like if they put in someone new and this someone new doesn't change anything, they just say, "Hey, I'm going to get rid of the fraud," but they keep the same systems. They keep doing phone calls.
What if next month we have 200,000 jobs? Is it going to be like, well, that's because Trump's told person to do this, or is it, oh, these are going to get revised and so we shouldn't listen to it? Now it becomes a bigger issue versus before.
Well, that's the funny thing about it, right? Is this was kind of a snap reaction firing, but at the same time, like, this is what Trump wants, isn't it? Like, he wants lower interest rates. And if you look at before this happened, before this jobs report, there was only a 40% chance of a rate cut in September. After the jobs report, there was an 80% chance. So like, this is what he wants. And so I don't know if he's like the snap decision. I don't know if someone's talking to him after and like looking back and be like, dude, we kind of, isn't this what you want? Like, we want lower interest rates and this is what's going to do it. So like, Why are we acting like this is a fraudulent report? If it's a fraudulent report, that means jobs are actually true, or jobs are actually doing well, and this report got it wrong. Then that means they wouldn't lower interest rates. Like I guess it's kind of contrary to what he wants.
Well, it depends. If what he wants is to sow doubt in all the data that's coming out so that the White House can control the narrative, he's achieved that. So at this point,
But he should sow doubt. They're wrong. They're always wrong. The fact, like Kyle said, that anybody believed was crazy.
let's be clear. He said they're being manipulated. Do you believe they're being manipulated?
Well, it depends what you mean by manipulated. Yes, Jay, 100% they're manipulated.
They're putting out a number they don't know is real. They're literally just, here it is.
AJ, it goes farther than that. It goes farther than that. So
They're putting out the data they have.
no, AJ, it goes farther than that. So first of all, like you get it because they only have a small sample size and they have to extrapolate it first, right? And the sample size gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So
They don't extrapolate.
Yes, they do.
They do not extrapolate. That extrapolation is human intervention. They do not extrapolate. They report the data that they have.
So Jay, what I mean by extrapolate is they take based off of that sample size. It's not like they survey everybody in the country. They take based off of that sample size and they extrapolate that's what's going on in the rest of the country. And so that's the first step. The second step is when you say, do they manipulate the data? 100%. They have seasonal adjustments. They have birth death adjustments, and which is like literally just guesses. Like birth death adjustment is just a guess, and seasonal adjustments, they look back at historical data and they, put some magic on it and they decide this is what it should be. So do they manipulate it? Yes. Do I think that they manipulated it differently this time than they have the last 2 years? No. The last 2 years they've been doing the exact same shit. They've been doing it's been equally unreliable. So like that's a loaded question when you're like, do they manipulate it? They do. Like they're not, it's not like they're taking this data in, they're putting it into a spreadsheet and releasing it as is. No, they do a ton of adjustments to this.
And it's good that people know that. Like, it's good that that's actually, because credits to Kyle as he's, been beating this drum for now the whole time, that it's like people act like these numbers, including the president and whoever else, they act like these numbers are real. Like, they're not real.
Between manipulating and getting to that number, remember, I just looked it up at on the household survey, there's 60,000 surveys that they generally get from this survey. That's per household. There's 128 million households in the US. Like, how representative is the small sample, 60,000 versus 120 million?
But I think this is a less important discussion. It's a very, very important discussion. But today it's a much less important discussion than the fact that we've now sown doubt on the reliability of this data from a political standpoint, that this data is being manipulated for political reasons by the person at the top. Does anybody here honestly believe that the BLS commissioner manipulated the data?
For a political reason?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So that's the issue. So that there are a whole lot of people out there, because the White House has said that's what happened. There are now millions upon millions, tens of millions of people out there that believe that's the case. And so now we have people on the right who say, wait a second, no, we have people on the right who say Trump's telling us the data is manipulated. We can't believe it. We have people on the left who are saying Trump's installing his own BLS commissioner. We can't trust that anyway, either. So now we have people on both sides of the aisle who don't trust the veracity of the data
they shouldn't have trusted it anyways. The Democrats are right not to trust it. The Republicans are right not to trust it.
Well, no, they don't trust. Then they won't trust the revisions. Do you trust the revisions?
Do I trust the revisions that have come out? I guess, yeah. It's whatever they put out. What you're saying they don't? That hasn't come out.
But if you believe there's political manipulation going on, you're not going to trust the revisions either.
Dude, I believe there's political manipulation in the data pretty much constantly. If you don't believe that, I'm worried about people not.
So give me an example. Give me an example.
A political manipulation of data?
Politically, yeah. Tell me how.
Administration. Which one do you want to talk about?
Either one. Give me an example of when data's been politically
I
manipulated.
mean, BJ, it's very easy just to point out with like
When has the jobs data been politically manipulated, and how?
now you're focusing on jobs data. Like,
Well,
there's
because that's what we're talking about. That's
okay,
what we're talking. We're
all right,
talking
but
about
that's
jobs.
not what you asked. You originally asked AJ when has any data been politically
But I'm talking about the
manipulated?
jobs because that's the data we're talking
so
about.
the jobs that I don't think correct. I believe you're correct. That it's never been proven that it's manipulated. There is going to be some bias, obviously, that you want to do well for the current administration, or this could happen right now. You could get fired. But at the same time, I agree with AJ to the extent that like we should be questioning this. And to me, that's what it comes to. It's really important how they handle this next part. If they just go and get, you know, the next commissioner of the WWE to run the BLS, then I'm gonna question it. Like, but if he goes and gets another Scott Besant, where he's got some credentials and should be able to do a good job, and not only that, that person goes in and they don't immediately just say, "Oh, I'm going to root out the corruption." They say, "Hey, we've been doing this the same way since the 70s. This needs a change. We're going to change how we are collecting this data." If that's what they go in and hey, I'm going to say, you know what, this was a good thing. It was kind of shitty how it happened. They should have honestly saw the bad jobs report, maybe had her testify in front of Congress or something, get to the bottom of it, figure out what the issue is instead of like hours later firing her. They should have done that. But if the end result is that we get somebody in who's qualified and is going to reform how they collect the data, then I think this is a win.
But they're not going to change how they collect the data. Let's be clear that hasn't happened in 30 years. I'm willing to bet on it. Anybody want to bet whether the data is going to be changed in the next 3 years?
Fair enough to bet on it. I think.
Well, but how do you not care? If you claim that's the reason why the data is bad, then you should care.
I didn't claim that. What are you talking about?
You didn't claim that the collection mechanism isn't the reason the data is bad? Why is the data bad then?
That the collection. Wait, I'm sorry.
The method, yes.
The methodology is just, it doesn't work. What are you talking about?
And Kyle said it's going to be changed. I said it's not, and you said you don't care.
Jay, I didn't say it's going to be changed. I said if it's changed, I think it's going to be a win. Dude, calm down.
You said, do you want to bet? And I'm like, why would I care to bet on it? Like, it's not like it's okay. Like, who cares? But let's get back to like what we're really talking about here.
Jay, just step off the warpath. Sit down, take a break here. We get what you're saying. We get that you don't think this is going to happen. My point is if this is the result, then that would be a good change. We don't know. You could say, "Oh, I bet it's going to happen," but the point is we're having a discussion of the possible outcomes of this and whether this is a good thing or a bad thing.
And I just think this thing of it's just now it's becoming like, again, the trust issue I think is legitimate, and that it's becoming an uncertainty now. So now the next job report's going to come out and if people don't believe the jobs number, then there's uncertainty. Like before, whether they were right, wrong, whatever, people saw the data and then they started making decisions based on that data. Now, maybe somebody like
but they shouldn't have been all along. That's the point.
Right, but maybe you were making adjustments like, oh, data's at 147. It's probably going to get revised down to 120. So I'm going to assume 120, and then I'm going to make my investment decisions based on 120 and blah, blah, blah.
But then it would be one of those 3 months in the last year and a half where they revised it up. And you're like, oh, like I just used crap data again. Like people who are actually, do you think Blackstone makes decisions based off of the BLS report, or do you think they go to ADP reports and you think they go to like other commercial available reports that are actually from the 21st century in their collection method?
Yeah, but the market does move, the markets aren't moving because of mom and pop investors. So when a bad job report comes out, the market moves in a particular direction depending on what it is, and those are all huge institutional investors.
But they're not, markets move for all sorts of reasons. And once again, this could move up higher because of interest rates. I think when we look at this, aside from the political theater stuff, the important things are actually what's driving it. So like if we're looking at the economy as a whole, what has been driving the revisions? Where are the revisions focused? Meaning, we had a huge overshot in healthcare. We have had massive cutoff of job hirings that were supposed to be happening in all sorts of sectors. Like, for example, the unemployment rate for newly grads in like coding, things like that, astronomically high. So there's all of these sectors as we are rotating through the economy right now that are changing hugely. We've got hit by tariffs. We've got hit by high interest rates, which are cutting off all sorts of things like development, right? And high interest rates is percolating through the economy, and it's having an effect on especially entry-level jobs. So when we see these numbers, the revisions, outside the dumb political theater stuff, why were they revised to this extent? That's what's important. That's what's important. What's happening in the economy?
And I explained why they were revised to that extent.
I mean, I would argue it's mainly collection method too. Like it's one of those, like, if you look at the response rate since the 90s, so this goes back to the 70s, but the response rate since the 90s, it was like 70 something percent. It's down in the 30s. It's been cut in half in the 90s. And not only that, it's getting to the point where, like, to Jay's point, who are the types of people who are actually going to respond to surveys if things aren't going well, right? Like, no one wants to come right out and say, like, hey, it's not going well for me. The person who's going to call you be like, oh, it's BLS. I'm not going to answer this one. And so as the response rate gets lower, if you decrease the sample size, the more volatile that sample size becomes, right? The higher the deviation you're going to have. And so you start to have big swings like this. And like that, to me, this is the whole issue, is just the collection method. It has nothing to do with anything else.
We did see an increase in jobless claims. Now, okay, yes, it may still be within the historical norm, right? Where it's not like it jumped up 5 or 6%. But at the end of the day, new hirings have slowed down. We have definitely seen a change in the labor force, and especially in certain sectors. And so what that means moving forward to the end of the year, and if we're projecting, because for us, interest rates are everything. Like, I mean, talk about the beating heart of an industry, right, for us. So is this going to change anything?
Well,
I mean,
to Mauricio's point,
it is?
what if we just didn't release it monthly? We waited to the second month out, and so we didn't have, instead of having 2 revisions, we just had 1 revision. We released it 2 months later, and then so the headline would be for, hey, the report that comes out right now, this isn't the June report, this is in July. The June report doesn't come out till August. And then we would have seen, like, I guess, would we be questioning the data at that point? Because if you just look back and you look at all the numbers after the revisions have happened, then it would show that it's a slowing jobs report. It's the point everyone's saying our jobs market is so resilient is because they don't factor in these revisions. So just give us 1 extra month. Even that change to me would be huge, and we would be more.
And by the way, speaking of like whether we should trust, I mean, how do you guys think the ADP report, right? That ADP report still showed over 100,000 jobs created, right? So I see a lot of times the ADP report come out, and then 2 days later the BLS report comes out, and they're widely different. Is there one that you would trust more over the other? Should we just look at those?
ADP is a grain of salt, right? Like, obviously, like you're not getting small businesses in there. You're not getting like ADP has, you have to be a certain size company, a certain type company to be using ADP. So like you just have to kind of factor that into your analysis. It's not going to cover the entire economy, right?
I think in normal times, ADP is probably pretty representative because the job gains and losses in the federal government and state governments, basically in the public sector, is going to be relatively consistent. You're going to have people moving into the public sector, out of the public sector, but you're not going to see massive losses or gains in the public sector. So ADP, while it may not give the exact number, it's going to be directionally correct. It's going to show trends correctly. And maybe you always adjust up 20,000 or down 20,000 for federal jobs. The problem is, over the last few months, I mean, with Doge, we saw that there were millions of people who took buyouts or didn't take buyouts, but are thinking about leaving or have gotten fired. And so what we're seeing at the federal level, at least, maybe at the state level also, is that there's been a lot of turnover and turmoil in public sector jobs. And so we don't know. We can look at the ADP number, but we don't know. Do we add 100,000 to that number or subtract 100,000
But doesn't
to that number?
ADP doesn't include government, does it?
Right. It doesn't, but it's interesting to see. I'm showing a comparison between ADP and BLS right now, and if you're not looking at this, it's just a chart that literally compares it side by side. But if you look at ADP numbers in blue, they were actually coming down over the last 4 months, and it went all the way negative last month to negative 23, and then now it spiked to 104. Versus BLS was going the opposite direction, was going higher and higher and higher until the recent one. So they were kind of diverging over the last 4 months or so.
And notice that that chart doesn't take into account the new jobs data, the new BLS data. That's the original data.
And also, like, if you look at the last year, especially leading up to the election, what did the government do? What does the government do? The government jobs was like fueling job growth, right? That and healthcare. It used to be government jobs and healthcare was fueling all 2024. And then Trump comes in and he basically ran on cutting government spending. And so the government job growth is going to go away, right? By design. Like he wanted it to go away. And so that's going to drastically change the difference in the data.
When you look at unemployment's roughly unchanged. So we talk about there's not as much of a robust hiring. But when you're talking about 4.1%, this is the thing that I get. I'm like, how much more can you go? I mean, we're at historic, like, low. So even when you're taking this, you're sitting here going, the hiring is slowed down, right? So we have a decline in labor force participation but that's by 0.1. So it was 62.4. It's now 62.3. So, basically that employment ratio. So it's roughly flat. Now, income's up. Earnings are up 3.7, which is great because it's higher than inflation. And we have, basically out of the sectors, manufacturing is slow on new hires, but their unemployment for that sector is well below national average. And so, when you're looking at this, it does bring to question how much is a good or a bad thing. If we're already at 4.1, we have wages are rising faster than inflation by a good amount, then is it necessary to have it? So is the Fed going to look at that and go, that's important? Or are they not going to care? Or are they just going to, we're still at 4.1. Unemployment's not changed. We may not be hiring as much, but at what point is true full employment? I mean, that's such a hard number to even peg now because of how they do it. It's not like it used to be. But what is full employment, and how many more are there participating that want jobs that can't get them? You know what I mean, so to speak.
I think that is a real question, though. Like, what is full employment right now? Because we do have many more opportunities for people to be quote unquote employed. Like when they look at the unemployment rate, all they ask is, do you have a job of any kind? Even if it's working a couple hours a week, that's considered employed. And there's many more opportunities to have part-time employment right now with the gig economy. And like 4.1 sounds great, or it was 4.2 the month before, but like our low was 3.4. So like is that like that change, we're up over that. What's the thing, 0.6 or 0.5 that the increase that it's supposed to be from the
but why are we believing those numbers and having issues trusting the jobs? I mean, I would go with the same. There's a lot of people that argue that really unemployment rate, especially if you look at the, there's like 7 or 8 U, is U1, U2, U4, U7, and if you look at the real unemployment numbers, those are much higher. So why are we trusting, like you're literally going with 4.1, 4.2, why are we trusting the unemployment rate and not trusting?
I guess it's not that we're trusting the actual number, it's the direction, right? Like it's the same thing where, like I honestly, there was a time there, like we were down at 3.4 and then we went up to like 3.6 or 3.8. And then we went through like 1 quarter, 2 quarters there where every month it ticked up 1, every month it ticked up 1. And I was like, this could be an issue. We could just keep going up there. And all of a sudden, if we hit 4.5 here, like we're going to have panic. And then it kind of just stopped, and it's just been bouncing around 4.1, 4.2.
Well, when it was down to 3.5, we were having labor shortages. That was bad. Restaurants were shut down. Literally, they closed their doors all over the place because they
I
couldn't find
wish I had the
workers.
number, because I did hear a report saying that if we had held the labor, I know it's not a huge change in the last year or so. If you're looking at the chart I showed earlier, where it peaked at like 67, 68%, now we're down at 62. But over the last year, it has gone down a little bit, but it's gone down from 62.7 to 62.2. If you keep the original numbers at 62.7, the unemployment rate does tick up a little bit. So it's not, so the labor participation rate does have obviously has an effect on unemployment, and I think that's part of the reason you're seeing a low number. Not to mention the way they calculate the freaking number. And I don't want to go into a whole episode on. I think we did one already
Net,
on how they
I
calculate
guess the takeaway here, though, we can complain and argue how we got about it. Overall, I'm happy there's an opportunity to make changes. There was no scenario when Trump took office. There was no scenario of Trump getting rid of the head of the BLS and people not on the left not saying, hey, he's going to put in a homer who's going to manipulate the data. There's no, even if he did everything absolutely the right way, where he said, hey, I've been unhappy with how many revisions we've had in the past. We need to take a look at this. And he pulls the head of BLS in front of Congress. She testifies. They determine that like she should have done something. This has just been all she came in a year ago, and it's just been status quo, and she's just been getting worse. Let's get rid of her. Even if they did everything correctly, everyone on the left still would have said, hey, we're putting in somebody who's going to be a homer, who's going to manipulate the data in Trump's favor. And then everyone on the right would say, hey, we're finally going to get the change we need. This is going to be good data. So like, at the end, we could talk about how it happened. I'm happy with the opportunity that there might be change. And even if there is change for the bad, I don't think it's any worse, to be honest, because we were getting fake data to begin with. So even if it's fake in a different way, it's still fake data. And we still have other resources out there for getting jobs data other than the BLS report. And I think this is maybe hopefully open people's eyes to say, hey, look, like, let's look at other jobs data. Let's look at stuff that has been developed in the 21st century for collecting jobs data, because like, that's like, we have the technology, as they say.
We have AI, and they're sending out little information sheets and calling people at home. Like, it's wild.
We're a few years from general intelligence, and they're still making phone calls and taking surveys with number 2 pencils.
What happens when the surveys get responded by AI?
That's true. AI is. I don't know if you guys. I've been using that Chat GPT a lot, and I've noticed like it's been hallucinating a lot more than it used to. I don't know if the updates have caused issues, but like that's one of my favorite things right now is to catch Chat GPT in a lie and then call them out on it. It's. I don't know if it's just something because you can't do it in real life to other people's faces, that like the fact that you could do it to a robot and they actually apologize and they say, I was wrong. And you're like, thank you for apologizing. It's one of my favorite things. Side note. All right, Jay, I know you had an agenda here. Do you want to wrap it up, or you think we're good with this? All right, let's take a social break. I actually finished my one drink. I gotta have to go and grab another one. But
what were you drinking? You were drinking that clear nonsense.
I was drinking
again,
one of the clears. It had been a while. I realized it hadn't been a while, or it had been a while. I went back to whiskey for a little while, bourbon, and then I hadn't pulled out a clear in a little while, so I went back with the clear. It's here's the empty.
I'm 2 Diet Cokes in. That means I need to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, so I'm gonna let Jay cool down for a second. I'll go with Mauricio first. How's it going, man?
It's going good, man. I got back from Jay and I were hanging out at Limitless for the last few days, and I don't know about Jay, but I had a blast. Primarily, I got to spend some time with him and eat some good sushi, spend some good time, spend some great time with your better half, which is also very, very great.
So I was at Limitless last time, and it was very like, I don't want to say doom and gloom, but a lot of people are like, be careful of this, be careful of this, be worried about this, be careful about this. And was it still the kind of the same error about the conference?
It's not that I don't care about the actual stuff. I just like the interaction that goes outside of the actual sessions. Like people are just there's a lot of people there, number one, and they're just mingling and they're having a good time, or they're having, they're going to dinners and drinks and all the conversation happening in the hallways. To me, those are always more important. From the sessions themselves, all we know is interest rates are going down, right, Jay? That's the bottom line. Interest rates will be coming down, and that's not a good thing. Don't careful what you wish for, because interest rates will be coming down, and not for the good reasons.
We should talk about that on a future episode.
Yeah, well, I got to understand it first. Jeff Snyder, who's just this great guy, but he's hard to understand to begin with. And I usually follow about 70% of what he says in a regular YouTube video. He made a great presentation, but like it was like I got about 20% of it. So
He always talks about like repo markets, right? Repo, reverse repo, and
yeah, but he started talking about some new thing that he says he's been talking about it for years, and I'm like, you've not been talking about this at all. There's some interest rate swap stuff that interesting.
I think you were a little drunk, Mauricio, because we actually did a whole episode on this at Limitless.
That's right, we did, but I made most of that up because I didn't really understand. Yeah, that's right, we did it. We did a drunk real estate 1.0. It can't be two. It was like half of the group was there. Your better half was part of it, and then Daniil McElroy.
Please tell me those. So it was Daniil and so Ken McElroy's wife, right? And my wife, and then the two of you. Please tell me the two of you didn't just talk about the economy and interest rates and shit with those two, because those two are they're both like operators and like in the trenches in real estate. So having the two of them on and a podcast.
What's hilarious is that Jay literally texts me about 30 minutes before the show and says, let's not talk about interest rates because Ashley doesn't really want to talk about it. Like you said, she's an operator. She doesn't want to talk about it. I didn't see the text. So my first thing I go into, just like, right off the bat, it's like, welcome. I was playing Kyle, like, welcome to real estate guy. And then I'm like, boom, I went right into interest rates, and I could just see Ashley's face just kind of go.
Because I listen to Ken and Daniil a lot too. And she's like Ashley. She's more of an in the trenches person. And like, she's inquisitive about like everything that's going on. But like, there's like Ken's got a huge organization, right? Like I'm sure he's got a couple nerds in the back room who are paying attention to that and feeding the data. And so like I was like, oh, those two are on. They're gonna just talk about like operations. They're gonna talk about ground level stuff that's going on. And then Ashley was like, oh, we talked a bunch about the economy and real estate, or in the economy and interest rates. So I was like, oh, really?
And I could see she wasn't happy about it, so I tried to pivot at some point to something else, and she was like, called me out on like this hard pivot that it was kind of out of place, and I was trying to help out, but anyway, it was a fun show from what I remember.
Nice. AJ, you're back. How's it going, man?
I made it, and I'm on to my next Diet Coke.
Things going well. Have you gotten over the fact that you thought you were having to present a topic today, and we kind of just you showed up and we were like, no, that's Jay's doing it.
You know what? It's okay. I get more time to do emails.
I feel like you were a little bit more energetic, and then you left for like 3.5 minutes, and then you came back, and now you're very mellow. So like, I don't know. Like, I know you don't drink, but
well, I mean, I'm not as antsy after I got some of that Diet Coke out of me. So.
What kind of? I'm just asking, what kind of drugs are legal in Idaho? Is that one of those states?
Drugs legal in Idaho, the ones that you have to pay the medical community for.
I assume you're drinking Diet Coke today, right?
Of course.
On to your second?
Third.
Wow. Jeez.
Going hard tonight.
I hope Tessa's prepared for you to come storming home tonight. Jay, what are you drinking?
I am drinking I'm about half bottle in of a cab from somewhere.
Somebody gave you as a gift that you don't remember.
Yeah,
and
it's called Lost Isle. It's actually pretty good. Hey, so as long as we're talking about Limitless, here's my fun fact of Limitless. How many pieces of sushi do you think Mauricio and I can eat together?
Together?
Yeah.
A lot.
70.
Well, you knew the answer, but the answer is 70 at least. We might have been able to do more. Who knows?
I extrapolated. You said you had like 32 or something, right? And I assumed Mauricio could eat more than you.
Nope. I ate more than Mauricio, I think.
Oh, really?
We did not order that much, but apparently the chef thought we were celebrities and gave us a whole bunch of bonus sushi.
Nice. And they brought out the boat for you. I feel like Mauricio, if they brought out sushi for Mauricio and it isn't in one of those presentation boats, like he would send it back. He'd be like, "What is this? Like, put it in the boat for me."
Every time Jay and I have had sushi together, we've had a boat.
Right.
For anybody that was watching the on YouTube, you saw the picture I just put up. It was actually 3 boats. We basically discovered America.
If someone came up and they were like, "Hey, listen, Mr. Mauricio, our boat, all of our boats are being used right now. Do you mind if we just bring it out, a nice presentation and plate? He'll be like, no, I'll wait for the boat. Mauricio, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking a little. I try to get I'm at the office again, so I'm doing a half bottle today, and this is as good as it got. But it's actually it's not a J, but it's a Josh Pinot, which not up to my standards, but
Isn't that a little cheap for you?
Yeah, I regret it. Life's too short to drink crappy wine, and I'm regretting the purchase.
Well, I guess you say that it depends on the purpose of drinking the wine, right? Like,
I'd like to enjoy it. It's really all I care about.
then I agree with you. There's other people who drink wine.
I want it to hit the lips and just be like, oh, it tastes so good.
There's other people who drink wine because they're naturally introverts, and social settings make them nervous, and a couple glasses of wine.
Well, that too, for sure. I'm definitely an introvert. That's a fun fact about me. I'm an introvert, but
yeah, right.
Mauricio and I spend hours together not talking to each other about how introverted we are.
Last time last year I went to Limitless with you guys, and I got to the second day, and just talking to that many people the first day, everyone's like, "Oh, we're going to this session." I'm like, I got to go to the pool for a little bit and just hang out by myself. And so I literally spent 2 hours at the pool for the first few sessions of the just decompressing, because I like the thought of talking to that many people again was awful to me. But I'm gonna have a second clear over here. This is the empty one. I still got to get another one. When Mauricio introduced the next topic, I'll grab another one. Love that stuff. Goes down easy, keeps you hydrated. Is it, Jay? Is it like 0 carbs, 0 sugar or something? It's
I mean, if you're if you're watching your weight and you're trying to watch your sugar, I mean, clear is where it's at.
0 carbs, sugar taste, zero enjoyment.
I mean, if there is, they do offer one that it's like almost 0 taste if you're into that, but they do have other ones that have taste too. All right. Well, we got to get this going. We're almost we're sneaking up in time here, but Mauricio is a lot quicker introducing topics than Jay is, so we should be okay here.
Should be a short one.
This is a bit of a pet topic of ours, because we've been seeing this happen a little bit more recently, where we have a lot of friends who are syndicators. We're obviously in the business of syndication. Mauricio's a syndication attorney, and Mauricio's job is to protect people to make sure that they're disclosing the correct things and they're doing everything properly when they're doing a syndication. And because of interest rates, because of the markets and things are going, and the values of commercial real estate have gone down significantly over the last few years, then there have been some operators who are going through capital calls, foreclosures, things like that. And there are some people out there, we pointed one out on Instagram, I'm not going to say his name, but we all follow him, where they make the jump basically that when things aren't going well and capital calls are happening, that there must be fraud's going on. And Mauricio wants to kind of just go through that and talk about, okay, what constitutes fraud and what's just, things happen, this is a risky investment, or as Jay puts it, if there was never any loss in syndications, then the return would be 6%. It wouldn't be double digits. So Mauricio, why don't you
This is just becoming a pet peeve of mine, because I think I've been critical of syndicators the last couple of years. I mean, there's a lot of things that they're doing that I've been pushing them not to do, like like the sticking their head in the sand and not communicating and doing a lot of that stuff. I've also been critical, I think, of LPs, because they're kind of absolving themselves of responsibilities. I mean, they do have that obligation to, if everything's disclosed to them, they're big boys and big girls. They should, read the docs and understand that there's a risk. Otherwise, to Jay's point, you'd be getting a 5% return on your money if these things were guaranteed. I always steal AJ's great analogy that these are not ATM machines, right? This is a business, and things can go well. But what's really been ticking me off, to be honest with you, so I'm kind of I might have a little bit of energy behind this, is this insinuation that just because people have lost money or doing capital calls or basically just lost a bunch of money, that somehow this is some kind of fraud that's going on, and that the SEC should get involved and this is fraudulent activity. And in fact, some of the folks that are actually peddling this are surprised that the SEC hasn't been doing anything, or they've even been reporting to the SEC, and the SEC is still not going on. And the reason for that is because there is no fraud. So what I wanted to do today is just kind of emphasize the point that just because things are not going well does not mean that there's fraud involved. I wanted to go through like the things that are going on in terms of from a liability standpoint, and I'll go through what exactly fraud is. But generally speaking, when you're talking about fraud, you are talking about intentional acts. You're talking about somebody has intentional conduct, meaning not only did they fail to disclose something, or maybe they omitted a disclosure, but they knew about it. Like they intentionally withheld that information because they knew it was going to be bad for you. They knew they should have disclosed it. They decided not to. And that the investor, in addition to that, actually relied on that representation. So even if it was intentional, but it was like, I just didn't disclose something, and the investor was like, that didn't really go into the affect the decision of going in there. But there has to be some sort of intent to deceive. Now, intent also, there's a little bit of a lesser thing. Like if you act what's called recklessly, like a reckless disregard for stuff, that could also rise to that level of intent. So it doesn't, even if it's not intentional, if you were just so far off and like you're just a complete moron, like that was kind of reckless conduct. Like if you're driving, you may not, like, for example, a great classical example is you may not have intended to kill somebody when you ran into them on the freeway, but you got schnockered and drank, 16 bottles of wine and got in the car and drove and like a maniac and on the wrong side of the street. You may not have intended to kill someone, but you're so reckless that's the same thing. So generally speaking, the obligations of a sponsor, they have all these what we call fiduciary duties, right? And there's usually three main ones. And these are like the duty of care. You may have heard of these, like the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, the duty of good faith and fair dealing, right? So I always give the example of like, especially once you're done with the raise and you've made all your representations in a PPM, once the deal's going, once you've actually purchased the property or acquired the asset, you have an ongoing obligation to act like a reasonable, prudent manager under the same or similar circumstances. So there's like this imaginary person out there that's like the reasonable manager. And what happens generally in court, if you ever go to trial, that you bring all these experts to try and define what that level is. What would a reasonable, prudent manager would have done under the same circumstances? And then you either fell below that standard or you met that standard or superseded that, right? So if you just didn't act like a reasonable, prudent manager, which arguably a lot of folks out there have not been doing a good job, and maybe they mismanaged up and they fell below that standard, then there should be some liability because you breached your duty of care. But that does not raise to the level of fraud because there's no intent. You basically just sucked at your job. You were supposed to do certain things. If one of you guys here, AJ, Jay, you would have been doing it, you would have done it differently. And because this person was inexperienced and just didn't know what they're doing, then that's fine. The other responsibility that syndicators have is a duty of loyalty. They always have to put investors' best interest in mind. They can't be doing things that are sort of in conflict of interest or that are not disclosed, but something that conflicts or that's just not in the best interest of syndicators. They have that obligation. And again, a lot of times, for example, if somebody, I'll give you a great example that I think there's some accusations out there which may or may not be true for some of them. It's like, hey, some of these sponsors are selling their properties so that they don't get stuck with the loan, right? There's a recourse loan. And so they're like, hey, if we sell this, at least we get all of our money back. The investors lose their money, but I at least don't get nailed for the loan. Arguably, you could say, look, you had a duty of loyalty. That was not a decision that was made in the best interest of the investors. Fine, you should be responsible for that. And all of these, you should be responsible for that. If you're a limited partner, if you've lost money because of the breach of the duty of loyalty or the breach of the duty of care or any of this stuff, then you absolutely deserve to be made whole, to get your money back, to sue them, and they should pay. I mean, they've caused harm, and syndicators should pay. But that is a far cry from arguing that you have been engaged in fraud, which is a much higher level. Again, requires intentional. So that's really what's boiling my thing. And then the last thing I want to say is there's the duty of good faith and fair dealing. And I think there's also been a lot of accusations, which again, if this is true, then there should be consequences for syndicators in terms of their quarterly reporting. Like as you report to your investors, again, you have an obligation to make sure you're truthful. You're not hiding things to make you look better. You're supposed to be divulging all this information. And if you don't do that, then yes, you may be even in violation technically of securities laws, or you may be in violation of your duty of good faith, but that does not rise to the level of fraud. If you are going to allege fraud, you have to allege that person knew what they were doing, it was intentional, and they made those statements or failed to make those statements for the main purpose of, benefiting themselves, but they knew about it and it was intentional. And I just don't think the vast majority of these, or all the ones I've seen, there's actually nowhere close to being fraud. It's just things just didn't go according to plan. And yes, maybe you and I would have done things differently. Maybe we wouldn't have bought the asset. Maybe we overpaid. Maybe we didn't anticipate interest rates going high enough. Maybe we don't have as much experience. We got over our heads. All of those things should result in damages.
Hindsight's 2020.
Hindsight's 2020 too, right? But even I've been, the main issue that's popping up, and not to get completely off topic, but is this idea of the interest rates and the rate caps, and and I actually started a couple years ago to start asking questions, which is like, hey, what was the industry standard? Because that's what we have to figure out. Like, what was everybody else? What would the reasonable prudent sponsor do back in 2021, 2022, when interest rates were low and they were getting an interest rate cap? What's the spread they should have got? What was everybody getting in terms of the length of the rate cap? What was the spread that they were getting? And if you're within those, you're within those parameters, then you've acted like a reasonable, prudent manager, and it's not necessarily your fault. But even if you didn't do that and you screwed up because maybe you didn't get a rate cap, right? Maybe you should have gotten a rate cap. Everybody, dude, you're an idiot. You should have gotten a rate cap because if interest rates go up, you would have lost the property. That still doesn't rise to the level of fraud because it's not like you intentionally, didn't tell the investor something or you intentionally withheld information for your benefit. So
that is the one that I'm actually a little bit interested on your take on it, because what I am seeing happening right now is there are syndicators who are going through things with properties right now, but at the same time, like, they're still running their business and they're raising money for other deals. And kind of, is it fraud by omission, I guess, is the question. Like, if you are like, not necessarily like if someone comes flat out and asks them, they would probably say, yes, this is happening. But at the same time, if they're omitting the fact that they have one property that's, going through a foreclosure process, or one property that they are, losing money and doing capital calls, or they are omitting the fact that they're partnered on a deal that is, these partnered with somebody and that person is, going through a fraud proceedings, is by omitting that, is that committing fraud? Like, it's not like they're flat out saying, no, we are not doing this. It's that they're kind of just like forgetting to mention it.
Well, it's definitely a securities violation, right? If you're not disclosing material facts, and I think it's hard for anybody to argue that, if you're already going through some foreclosure issues, or this money is going to be used for help on a. Well,
no, not that the money's not going to go there. It's just for the purpose of, to your point before, like, LPs have kind of gotten very comfortable just not really doing a lot of due diligence on operators. They kind of just trust what's being presented, and they say, hey, here's a track record of like deals that have closed, and we bought this property in this year, we sold this property, it was a 20% return, this one was an 18% return, this one was look how great we did. And they're kind of just omitting the ones they don't want to talk about right now that are going through issues, and they're saying, hey, we're great, like, come invest in this deal. But like, I obviously have no idea. I assume they're not flat out, like, if someone asks, hey, how's this property doing, they're not going to lie to them, but they're kind of just.
Is it reasonable to say, like, if it would change my decision to invest or your decision to invest, or likely or possibly, like, where's the bar?
Yeah, so that's an easy one. I talk about this a lot. Actually, we just talked about it a few weeks ago on the coaching thing. You cannot cherry pick. The SEC has been very clear. If you are going to disclose your prior successes, then you have to disclose all of them. You can't just cherry pick one or the other. Whether you have to disclose any of them depends a little bit on the type of offering you do. If you're only accredited, if they're not accredited, you have an absolute obligation to disclose everything, all material information, and not omit anything. But with accredited investors, you just want to make sure primarily that you're not omitting facts. So if you're out there talking about how great your track record is, and you're omitting the fact that one of them is in foreclosure, then yes, I would say that's an omission of fact. The question, though, is, does that rise? So that's a securities violation. And if that's the case, then that syndicator, if that caused losses, because obviously the investor wouldn't have invested had they known that, and there's a loss of capital, then they should make that investor whole. There should be either regulators coming down for breach of securities laws, or you can sue that sponsor, and you should be able to get a judgment, and you should be made whole, and blah, blah, all that stuff. The question is, does it rise to the level of securities fraud? And for that, you'd have to show that you intentionally withheld this information, knowing that if you told them this information, they wouldn't invest in your deal. And maybe that's not a hard argument. I mean, that's something I potentially would, especially when you have non-accredited, if you're omitting something like that, and obviously you knew about it, then I think the argument that, yes, it's intentional because you knew about it, and obviously it's a kind of an obvious thing, then yes, I think there's an argument to make it. But that's the difference. There's no doubt it's a securities violation, right? And that's a monetary thing. The question is, does it rise to the level of fraud? which is what everybody's saying. When you start throwing out the word fraud, that is a very elevated, serious accusation, which is way different than just a regular omission of fact.
Okay, so the next one I have a question is reporting requirements. So like is there kind of a general, like, once again, like it's kind of is omission an issue? Because like if someone who is like, hey, like we're reporting quarterly, and then all of a sudden things aren't going well and they're not reporting quarterly, and when they do the reports they kind of just cherry pick what they're reporting, and like the reports change, is that getting to the level of fraud? Because like that has happened quite a bit. It's obviously, it's, you know, it's human nature when you have a couple of bad quarters and you're like, hey, I got to turn this around. You have every expectation you're going to turn that around, and you kind of just don't report things because you're like, oh, because that next report, once I get to November, everything's going to be better.
It's hard to defend. Like, I've heard the stories, right? I've heard the stories where investors getting reports, everything's great, and then they hear that their property got foreclosed in the Wall Street Journal. Like, that's problematic. Like that, there's no way that should be happening, right? But if you're reporting every quarter and you're telling people how things are going and things aren't going great, and our interest rates went up, and we're trying to find alternate financing, and I've seen a lot of that. I've seen a lot of folks that are really doing a good job of this is how it is. Things aren't going great. Interest rates went higher than when we wanted to. We're looking for alternate. We're trying to get a loan modification. We're looking at other private equity. It's not working. We've narrowed it down to these two, and they're literally communicating. And if at the end of that process you lose the property because you couldn't get people to commit to a cash call, or you couldn't get outside funding, then I don't think forget about any fraud. There's really nothing for you to, at least on that front, right? There's nothing for you to come after. But yes, if you're intentionally withholding that information and they don't find out about the deal dying until from the papers, which I've heard a few have done, that's a problem.
Well, let me ask you a question. So, I almost hate to ask this question because I don't want people to think that this is how we operate. And if anything, our investors complain that I communicate too much. And I mean, you guys hear me talk. I always talk way too much. But couldn't somebody make the argument? And again, this isn't the way we operate. This isn't what we do. I'm just being devil's advocate here.
But Jay, I think we can be a little bit candid that things like this are happening to people we know, and it is a little close to home to us. So we do know real scenarios where stuff like this is happening that we are invested in. Like, we're invested in things that are getting capital calls. We're invested in, like, as LPs, like, as we invest in other stuff as LPs too. We're not just operators.
100%. I'm just trying to point out that we have investors who trust us, and I'm not asking this question because I'm trying to figure out how to get around something or cut corners. This is more of a devil's advocate type question. Couldn't an operator argue that at the point that an LP invests, they have no control? They have no decision-making authority. There's nothing that they can do to impact the deal. So why do I need to tell them if bad stuff is happening or good? Why do I need to tell them anything? Because it's not going to materially change their outcome if I don't tell them. And if I tell them everything's great, but it's bad, again, it's not going to materially change the outcome because there's nothing they could have done. Is that a viable argument?
No, because first of all, there is things they can do, right? Usually LPs do, if they can all band together and actually get enough votes, they could vote you off as a manager. They can remove you as manager, right? So that's important information. If I think you're not doing a great job and I'm getting updated honestly, and I'm like, this sponsor group's not doing a good job, we need to remove them and start that process. That's number one. Number two, they can also sell, right? They can actually go find and say, hey, this investment's going south. Let me go sell it to somebody else who's willing to take the risk and sell it for 10 cents on the dollar or 20 cents on the dollar. Yes, there's a right of first refusal. There's a whole process, but there are things that the investor can do, and not having fully the reporting, I think, is a big deal. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is just people just don't think through the compliance part. Once they're done with the PPM and the securities lawyer is gone and they're now running the business, there's nobody really on the team that's accountable for the compliance and making sure what they're doing is all on the up and up.
And this it does happen, by the way, because I am invested. My wife and I are invested in a syndication where we are LPs, and the operator ghosted, stop reporting. We were starting to see things in the news about them, and we are overthrowing them. It's in the legal process. We actually went all the way down through the legal process, and then this is a rare case where the SEC did step in and then they started going after them. So we, I don't know if this is common, Reese. I've never actually asked you this, but we actually paused our legal process because the SEC is now doing a separate legal process, and we're like, it's going to kind of step on their toes, and it's going to muddy the waters. And our
that's
lawyers,
very typical. If you hire lawyers to go after somebody civilly, and then the regulators get involved, whether states, federal, certainly then usually the lawyers will back off and
which we were kind of annoyed about, to be honest.
Did he ever come back?
Oh, yeah. So now, obviously, you get legal subpoenas and they have to reply and stuff, and it gets to the point. And I'm sure you guys have been through a lot of lawsuits too, and we kind of know the ropes now, where basically someone like that, there's a lot of ways to drag it out. And so this has been going on for a year, and they just keep dragging out, and they only respond to the stuff that they have to, and then they get subpoenaed for this, and then it gets postponed due to this or that, and then we were getting to the point where they actually did accept us bringing in an outside person to kind of step in and do an audit and figure out where all the money is and do all that stuff. And then the SEC got involved kind of right then, and we're like, oh, we were just getting somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, we actually were.
Yeah, that's careful what you wish for. Once the regulators get involved, usually you lose a little bit of control, and they take their sweet time. But yeah, if the SEC's got involved, then I think you're clearly there at the level of fraud. And yes, ghosting your investors, and you get to that point, that I think that's where it really starts crossing into some material intentional. But again, if you're constantly so the safest thing you can do as a syndicator is continue to communicate at least the same frequencies you've done. If you've been doing quarterly reports, do quarterly reports. Although I would argue that if things aren't going well, you probably need to maybe step that up a little bit, at least at the beginning. But at least if you're consistent with your reporting and just be open. Like I said, I've seen a lot of great.
Investors are great with that. Investors, I think, for the most part, I think investors, when you're having issues, though, and you're like, hey, this is what we're doing, these are the issues and the steps and the measures we're taking, right? For the most part, I think investors are understanding. Like, they understand markets aren't in your control. They understand that certain things happen, and then they want to know what you're doing to fix it. That's what they're concerned about, right? It's what are the actions? Where are you moving? And I think, to Jay's point, the over communication, that just, hey, here's what's going on. Here's an update. Here's what's happening, right? We've got to go get this. We got an interest rate hike. Taxes went up, right? Insurance, whatever it is.
Well, answer questions. I think the biggest thing to me is, like, when you do quarterly reports, like, have a Q&A after, and people just, I've found with the quarterly reports that we do, like, some people just want to be heard. Like, they just want to, like, okay, we know you're frustrated. Like, just like, here, what are your concerns? What are your questions? And then kind of when you spell it out, say that, as to your point, this is what we're doing. This is everything. And you just answer their questions and tell them basically, we hear you. Then that eases a lot of their concerns. It's when there's no communication and they don't feel like they're being heard, that's when the frustration comes.
Yeah, and I think it also is, obviously there's a level of if you ended up overpaying for property, or you had a plan in place and you executed the plan and the results didn't happen, you weren't able to raise. I think that's where the issues start to, like, well, we have to admit that our whole plan was erroneous, or we overpaid for this thing. Because you hear a lot about that too. Like, we even talking to you guys, you guys make bids on properties and you get outbid by somebody for $2 million. So you did your underwriting, you said this property's worth X, somebody paid $2 million more, or even more than that. In your opinion, that person way overpaid, and because of that overpaying is what that's the reason you wanted to pay lower for that, is because you didn't think that if you did all the things you were going to do, that it would have worked out. And that's kind of what's happening. So I think syndicators,
but also hindsight's 2020, because when cap rates rise 2 points, everything you bought was overpaid. So I mean, today there's not if you're in real estate, you overpaid compared to 2 years. That doesn't exist.
And that's the thing. Right? I think most, like, we're getting a little bit off topic, but I would venture to say of all the folks, again, with the I'm still pretty involved with, now that I've got the coaching thing, so I get a lot of people in the group, so I get the feedback. But the vast majority of issues, 80%, maybe even more, are the interest rates going through the roof in such a short period of time. Even though they made some preventions by getting insurance to cap that insurance, just, again, 2020 hindsight, ended up, well, you know what? Instead of getting a 2-point spread, you probably should have gotten a 6-point spread, or a 4-point spread, you would have been fine. Or instead of doing a 3-year, you should have done a 10-year. I don't even think that's even possible. But yeah, that's 80% of the time. That's what's happened, is that the interest rate went up so fast that you blew by your insurance cap, your rate cap, and now your interest rate payment and your loan payment just is too
because
high.
an interest rate cap is usually like, it depends on the loan, but a lot of times it's only for 2 years, right? So you buy you let's say you bought a property in 2021 or even 2022. Let's say you bought it in 2022 at literally the height. You were one of those people who bought it at the absolute peak. I paid the most for any property in the market. You bought that interest rate cap, thought you were good, you had yourself covered, you did your underwriting at that cap. This is the max I'm going to pay for interest rates. And then all of a sudden, like, your business plan was longer than 2 years. Then
Right, but that's where the standard of care goes in, because if you had done that rate cap for 6 months and blown by that, you'd have, dude, what were you doing? You at least should have gotten it for 2 years, right? But if the entire industry, if all you guys got 5-year caps, right? That was a standard. Like, what are you, an idiot? You have to get 5-year caps, and you only got a 2-year cap. Then you're kind of falling below the standard. Now, my research and my unofficial survey, everybody was getting 2 to 3 year caps, and everybody was getting about 2-point spread. So if they bought the place at 4.2% interest rate, they would get a cap to like 6.5. But you could always argue, well, why didn't you get it up to 9?
And those 2 years went fast, and interest rates didn't come down.
we have a property that at one point the rate cap was costing us $1 million a year, and that was a property we bought in 2019. So like we missed selling in the run up. In hindsight, like, you look back, hindsight 2020, like, we should, even though our business plan wasn't done, we should have just sold, right? Like it's just one of those, like,
sold everything,
right? We should exactly, everything we had, we should have known that it was going to peak in the mid early 2022. We should have put everything on the market, just sold it, and then waited for 3 years and then bought everything back. But that's to your point. Like, our interest rate cap, I think is 2.36, and we went from paying $900 a month or something was how much we were accruing for interest rate cap, and now it's $1 million.
All right, we had insurance. Like, guys in Florida are having this bad, and we had it in Oklahoma. Insurance doubled. Literally, we had property where it was like the entire net income gone on a renewal that they said had 100% chance of getting hit by a tornado, which is interesting, because I'm like, if there's 100% chance, could you let my manager know so we don't have someone there? Like, you obviously know. So,
well, 100% chance. Like, you got to look and be like, actually, this might not be bad. We just got to have a really good early warning system, get everyone out of there, and then I'll get a new property.
I think, though, it comes down to, I don't know, as of now, I don't know one operator that does not have an issue with insurance, taxes, because the tax problem is universal. When cap rates go up, but your tax rates are going up, meaning the value of the property is going down, but your taxes are going up because they're not reassessing and they don't catch up. And then you have a lot of increased competition or whatnot, but then you have interest rates as high as there are. So these are struggles that we're talking about that are standard. And if you're not willing to accept them, you literally shouldn't be doing this. So I think when you are discussing about talking to investors, this is why it's important to be like, you need to be open, you need to be communicating, because all these things go in cycles. And commercial real estate for the last 3 years has been in a horrible one. Like, we're talking, 2008, which was the worst, and then these high interest rates, horrible. So sponsors that, like, especially Kyle talked about, that ghost, that aren't talking, right? But the ones that are, you're out talking and they're getting that. If they're invested in multiple properties, these investors, they're hearing it everywhere. So how you handle turbulent times, even if you have a property that's doing good, you have investors that are scared. That's just true. You do. They're getting capital calls on other deals. They're right. So how you manage through turbulent times is really important. And especially thinking about now, we're talking about this. We don't know what will happen in 4 months. What if all of a sudden we have tariffs and a whole bunch of other stuff cause mass inflation and interest rates go even higher, right? So are you looking at that? Are you talking about that with investors? What are you preparing to do? How are you hedging? What are you doing on your part? And I think that's that open communication about what you're facing, what the industry's facing, and what you're researching and what you're trying to do. that's what they want to hear and know about at the end of the day.
I mean, just I guess my thing is just the idea that the LPs, and Mauricio touched on this, the LPs have no responsibility in this. That, like, to me, that's what where the crux of a lot of this is happening. In the case that, I mean, I get it, right? If you started investing in 2015 in syndications, and things just kept going up. So these operators were they'd buy something in 2015 and say, hey, we're going to hold this for 5 to 8 years. But then it ran up so much and they sold it in 2 years and they got a 24% IRR. And then that happened a few times because it kept going up from 2015 all the way up to 2020. And then, with the sky fell, we were all panicked, and then it went right back up. And so these LPs kind of just got, to your point, as you call it, AJ, they were getting mailbox money. And then when they stopped, they're all of a sudden like, "Oh, you guys must have screwed up. Something must have happened." And to me, like, as I said, we've invested in a bunch of LP things, and we have a few that these LP investments aren't going well. And a funny one actually that I think is super interesting is we invested in one back in 2019, and a lot of things happened. It actually got hit by a tornado, and a lot of things happened. And the operator that's going on, that property is actually doing quite well. And the operator's selling it right now. And we're projected to have a decent return. It's not gonna be, in line with all the other expectation stuff, but it's a decent return. I'm okay with it. But because it's the bottom of the market. Everyone kind of knows the bottom of the market. LPs are pissed off on that one too, right? Because they're saying, hey, why are you selling at the bottom of the market? They know that the operator is going through some other things with other properties, and they might be taking proceeds from that when they sell and putting their own money into other deals. And I'm kind of like, you invest in someone knowing that they're human and there's other things going to be going on and that they're going to make the best decision at the time. And okay, is it maybe not the best time to sell? Maybe not. But you are trusting. The point of an LP is you're investing with someone, knowing their character, knowing the type of person they are, knowing their track record, knowing all these things because you did that research, and then knowing they're human and knowing that things happen. And you kind of have to just accept the decisions they're making because that's what you signed up for. As long as it doesn't get to the point of fraud, you kind of just have to accept that. So,
and it's not just the fraud. Like, look, if the sponsor failed to disclose something to you, and therefore you you did your due diligence and you didn't know about this, because then 100% you've got a legitimate beef. But if that risk was disclosed to you, like, literally, I was actually going back to the language, like, literally in the risk factors is like, hey, we have a floating rate loan. It can go up. We've bought insurance, but there's a chance that if the interest rates go up too fast, it'll blow through insurance, and we might not be able to. We may lose the property. Like, literally, there, you reviewed that, or you should have reviewed that. And if you then made a decision, an intelligent decision, whether you still want to invest in that, then I think it's on the LPs. My concern is only if they did not disclose something to you, or they lied to you, or they hid something to you, then 100% you need to be really upset. But if they disclose it to you, that's their job. That's my job as a securities attorney back then.
Well, but Mauricio, you also got to talk about and add in, like, we hold the debt. So, like we were talking about earlier, on these properties, I guarantee the loans personally. The LPs don't. So we have our capital in them, and we also guarantee the loans. So, two, at some point, the risk is too great. So there is a little bit of a disconnect, when you're going, there's a future of it, like depending on how it's set up, obviously. For me, which I guarantee the loans, it's a different kind of thing. Some certain classes and especially sizes, you guys probably don't. In apartments, you can get easy non-recourse, things like that. For us in our business model where we're turning things around, and we want to refinance later, we take more risk up front. So we buy underperforming or vacant. I'm guaranteeing all the debt, and then and putting my money in, and then the LPs come in too, right? So I think it's important that you also look at the person, like Kyle said, these are real people, right? And the difference of you losing capital that you put in and them losing everything, literally going bankrupt, losing homes, losing the other assets that trickle into other investors or whatever that may be. I don't know what the setup is. But these things aren't isolated in a box. And, for us, we do that because we're well capitalized. We can do that. We have a long track record. But when these things go south, which we've had properties that were in fill-up mode and we had rates drop 60%, crushed us, right? Like crushed us. And you're sitting here going, all right, we're saying guys start paying the bills and everything else for it. But we look at it obviously differently about those properties and turning it around. We hold the debt. So we hold all the risk in that scenario. And so I think when you look at that relationship between your GP and your LP, and you're talking about decisions that need to be made when the situation changes massively. And I think that's what Kyle's bringing up too. The situation's not the same. You may have had a plan here, but no one in the right mind thought in Kyle's situation that we would go through inflation of 8% and plus and interest rates, right? No one
could have because you don't agree with a business decision doesn't mean it's fraudulent.
Yes, doesn't mean that it's out to hurt you. It doesn't mean
deciding to sell now. If they're making a business decision to sell now when you don't think it's the right time, that's not fraud. You can make the argument that, okay, they have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize it. But at the same time, like,
you don't know the future.
No one knows the future. To your point, the wheels could fall off even farther. And now was a great time to sell.
Exactly. If it goes south later on, all of a sudden you're like, he was a genius.
Right.
And the only exception there is obviously if selling is not in the best interest of the company, it's not an investment, but it's in your best interest. And so there's that conflict. You always have that duty of loyalty. So you always have to be looking out for the best interest of the investors. But if the investors have already lost all their money, like if the property has already gone down 20%, then they're going to lose all their money anyway,
Right. Well, I guess, yeah. So takeaways are be careful calling fraud. And if you're an operator, communication, right?
And just be careful. I mean, and just one little thing that I want to add here, and I feel somewhat responsible too, because I have not been talking about this, but just keep in mind that your compliance does not end once you get all the investors in and you've paid your syndication lawyer and they're off to the next one and you're off to operating. You still have to make sure that somebody on your team is looking into the compliance and making sure that whatever facts they're doing is in compliance with the PPM, is in compliance with the operating agreement, and just somebody's in charge of that.
I have a question. Could I ask before we end it, Kyle? I do have a question. So, okay, let's talk about this format here, for example. Like, we talk about over communicating, being honest. What should syndicators do in open public formats? Because I know there's strict rules about when you are selling, opportunity, right? That's different when you're getting investors. After you have the investors, though, and you're in the deals, what does communication external look like in that situation? We talk about it obviously internal, you need to communicate everything else, but how's that work externally when you're talking about deals where you have investors in?
Meaning like communication, like posting on social media,
or like, let's say this podcast here, we're all talking and we're like, oh, let's talk about a few of our deals. I want to break down a case study for you and show you this deal that happens to have investors in it. And I'm like, we're trying to make a decision. Maybe we want to do this or this. Like, how is that bad for syndicators to do if they're open? Like, how's that go?
It's not a direct, I mean, obviously they're not communicating to their investors and not making representation to the investors. However, it could potentially, it's public record. So people have the transcripts. So if that somehow ties into something that's been going on, like for example, if you're communicating to your investors and telling them one thing, and then they hear you on a podcast saying something completely different about, all of our deals are going great. And then they're like, wait a minute, you told us that, or maybe the other way around. Everything's going great from your communication, but now you're sharing on a podcast that you've had some issues. Well, now I can go back and say, wait a minute, were you really truthful in that communication internally? That's, I think, where the issue is. You obviously don't have any, you're not raising any, assuming you're not raising capital to the public, then you've got no fiduciary duties to the public. You're not raising money. You've got no securities concerns with the public. But it could, anytime you're speaking in public, and to be honest with you, as you guys know, even if you're not speaking in public, the video gets out, the transcript, people are always recording and there's transcripts, that could always come back as exhibit A to some accusation that they're going to make for you based on internal communication. They can use that as ammunition against you for sure.
So, but if your communication is the same, right? Meaning, yeah, this is an open known problem. We're dealing with an interest rate challenge. The investors know it. We know it. That you're like, that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, that's yeah. I mean,
in general, if you don't lie on either side, you should be fine, right? like, if you just tell the truth, like, then you should be okay.
It's more like as a former litigator, it's like it can be used for like impeachment purposes, right? Like if you're saying, look, no, I didn't believe this or that. There's no way I would have done that and then you're like, wait a minute, you were on a podcast back in 2023 and you stated this, and it contradicts whatever you're trying to argue later on. That's always a concern when something's out in public. So it can always come back to bite you. But no, you've got no obligations to the public. And at that point, you're talking to the public. So if you're not raising capital and you're telling the truth, then I wouldn't be too concerned.
Yeah. Communicate, be honest. I mean, it's...
Can you over communicate? Is that bad?
No, I think obvious communication is good. I mean, obviously you want to be truthful, but yeah, I think that was part of what we were talking about. Like if things aren't going bad, I mean, Ken talks about this all the time. Ken McElroy talks about, communication builds trust. And so you can get a lot more trust by delivering bad news, to your point, AJ. Like if you're delivering bad news and you're just letting them how it is, I think you get a lot of trust from investors versus sticking your head in the sand. So yes, double or triple your communications, at least initially, right? If you're doing it once a quarter and things aren't going well, maybe you should be communicating once a month, or if things warrant and things are moving fast, maybe there's a communication for a little bit once a week or once every couple of weeks. I don't think over communication is bad. I think keeping investors appraised, I just think it's a good business practice, not even more of a securities thing. As long as you're truthful and you're not making any misrepresentations. I mean, maybe there's an argument to be made that the more you communicate, the more chances that you slip up and make a misrepresentation. But assuming that's not the case, then I think, over communicating is better than under communicating.
Do we have to disclose to our investors that sometimes we get together with friends and drink too much, sometimes once a week?
You should communicate that you like the top 10 that Kyle's going to bring up here in a second. And even though you really don't, that's a miscommunication.
Actually, you talk about over communication. Like I always thought Jay was crazy because the guy literally gives out his cell phone number to like our investors. And I was like, I like, you're crazy for doing that. Like an investor could literally just call Jay on the phone if they have questions about the property, but
multiple times a week I get calls.
Yeah. So like, I would never do that. I would be like, hey, you want to set up a call? Here's the link. Schedule a Zoom.
Sorry, I just left. So, but one thing you do need to be careful though. I will say one thing about that strategy is that you want to treat all of your investors the same. So it is a little bit tricky when you start making one-on-one communications with investors. Like you're giving information to one investor, but you're not giving information to all of them.
What if they're asked? But those investors are asking specific questions.
That's a good point. Like, is it a problem if someone calls? Because to Jay's point, like he picks up the phone. Like I never pick up the phone. Jay picks up the phone.
So do we. We pick up the phone. Like we're president, me, we pick up the phone.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, obviously you're like somebody's on the investor relations team or whatever, but just be careful about making sure you don't give one investor information that you don't give other investors. That's all I'm saying.
No matter how cute they are.
Yeah.
So just as an FYI, we all use this podcast just to get free legal advice. That's the only reason we're all on here.
That's the only reason I got invited to be on the pod.
Well, now that's kind of your job, isn't it, Mauricio? Aren't you a consultant now? So
yeah, now I'm just in an advisory consulting capacity, and people come and ask me questions on our weekly calls. We're more of a consulting.
Yeah. So I don't feel that bad. Like Mauricio's way too generous with his time. Like he literally, if you just go onto his like YouTubes and stuff like that, he's giving hundreds of dollars worth of time to people.
Thousands.
Thousands, yeah.
Well, hundreds to each person, I guess.
To each person.
Each person's getting hundreds of dollars of legal advice just by sitting there. All right. That's all we got, right? Jay, you got any final thoughts? You're a little quiet on that one. I don't know.
I was listening. I was learning. I was taking it in.
That was a really good section, Mauricio.
Awesome. Top 10, got to bring it back. We didn't do one last week. I listened back. I was like, shit, I forgot the top 10.
Dude, I tried to do a top 10 at the live at Limitless, and it kind of fell flat because nobody likes it.
You're no good at doing it. That's the problem.
That's a you problem.
That's a you problem.
We did try to do a would you rather, and then Jay came up with the lamest "would you rather" that nobody wanted to answer. It was like the lamest. I don't remember what it was, but it was like,
All right, top 10. My thought on this top 10 was we were talking about the BLS report before. The BLS report hasn't materially changed how they collect data since the 70s. They're still doing surveys on phones. And so I thought it would be fun to look at what were the top 10 best electronic inventions in the 70s to kind of just see the difference in the technology right now that they could possibly be using. As we pointed out, we have AI, we have up up to the day reports like ADP reports for payrolls and stuff. But they're still using the same kind of methods that they used in the 70s. So let's go through real quick the top 10 here. So this is the top 10 electronic inventions in the 70s. So this was cutting edge in the 70s. Okay, so number 10, the portable music player. That was the cassette. If you're under the age of probably 35, you don't even really know what a cassette is. So I had a portable cassette player back in the day. So that was number 10. Number 9, GPS. They had just kind of come out with GPS. The U.S. Navy was the only
when you
one
say
using
come out, that wasn't we're not talking consumer. This
No.
was like
That was in 1978. The government for the military started using GPS for the first time. All right, the next one is the Apple computer, and I feel like when I say Apple computer, people aren't going to get perspective of when I say Apple computer what
the
actually
Macintosh?
The
what
Apple
what
IIe.
what it was. So I feel like I have to share what it looks like. This is so like this wasn't like the Apple computer like
Is that really a true picture?
I don't know if it is, but that's kind of the level of the Apple computer. Like this is like the release of the Apple computer.
Dude, if you're listening to this, you got to go on the YouTube and take a look at that picture. There's no way that's true. Comment below if you think it's real or it's just somebody making a joke.
So the microcomputer it's kind of along the same lines. This then in 1975, the first digital camera. So they were on film up until 1975, the first digital camera. And I got another funny picture with that, but I feel like we got to move this along. Number 5, the VCR, another thing that most people under the age of 35 would have no idea what it is. It's kind of the exact same as the cassette. That was like the general.
When did Beta come out?
I don't know.
Around the same time.
Right around this. Yeah, they was competing, right? VCR was 1972. The first ever cell phone. So I like this. We're really aging ourselves here, but like you guys remember Zach Morris, Safe by the Bell, that like big cell phone. I remember our first quote unquote cell phone was in the car. It had to be hooked into your car, and like it was almost like a backpack.
Like the late 80s. That was like the late 80s.
That was in the 80s. So like it was the first. So the first commercial cell phone didn't come out till 1983. But technically it was invented in 1973. So number 3, floppy disk. That was a great one. You could store like a couple megs of data on there. Few that would be like less than one picture these days. Number 2, the first email was sent. Once again, though, that would like the internet wasn't really a thing.
Al Gore sent it.
And then number one, the best invention of the 70s. Anyone want to guess?
Calculator.
Pong was the best invention of the 70s. That was the pinnacle of electronic invention. So there you go. This is the type of technology that was cutting edge back when they developed the BLS methods that they still use today.
They said they do it now on the internet. There's no internet back in the 70s.
But they still do it through phone calls as well. Like there are there are different collection methods from my understanding, but they still call businesses and then record the businesses and then relay that information. So there we go. Jay, you got a hypothetical for me?
Yeah, I got one. Trying to think of the number.
50.
50 is the number. There you go. 50 million. If you accept a random male person, penis-bearing person, on the planet of your same age, and you are put into a cage, fight to the death. If you win, you get the 50 million. If you die, you die.
It's
But you
random.
know-
It's completely random.
All you know is it's a guy your age.
100%. I'm in. I mean, but I feel like I'm probably not what this question was developed.
I'd do it.
You do it, AJ?
AJ, I just got to tip AJ over and I'm good.
True. So let's do
no,
it.
No weapons though, right? Just straight hand to hand.
Yeah. It's
Hand to hand.
Yeah, I'd do it.
I'd do it too.
Mauricio?
Yeah. Who knows, man? I think the odds are too. There's probably a 10% chance I get in there with some freaking with Kyle or something. Although Kyle's not my age.
No, it's different age. You'd end up in there with me.
Oh, then I'm in.
I mean, what you have to realize is these days, street fights, like if you watch people with street fights, that's not the average person. The average person doesn't want to fight. The average street fight, one of those two people knows how to fight because there will be one person who instigates and the other one says yes. Most people don't say yes to a street fight. If someone's saying yes to a street fight, there's a reason. And I learned that in hockey in my second ever professional fight, that if you ask someone to fight, most guys still say no. Like there's like, no, I don't want to fight you. But the guys who say yes, they're usually the guys who you don't want to fight. So like, you have to realize that's not the average person. So like it's like I'd take that in a heartbeat.
Me too.
Jay, you didn't answer.
I said I think I would. Yeah.
So you're saying that you would actually kill somebody for 50 million? Is that what I'm hearing?
So I mean, I knew if we were going to go there, I would throw in the disclaimer that the person doesn't, like, they come back to life or some magical thing. Because obviously killing somebody that's the hardest part of the whole thing. Is that even if you
they
win,
signed up for it too, right?
Yeah, still, you don't want to kill somebody.
I mean, it is a decent calculation though, because there's a certain unless they skew the amount of money to based off of like your net worth or something, there's a certain calculation of like there's a certain level of people they're just going to say no because it's not worth it to them, right?
Okay, here's a revision on the question. Same question, but it's not completely random who you fight. It's somebody your own age, but they've also said yes to this deal.
Well, that's what I assumed.
Oh no, I was just assuming a random person. Oh, see, that makes it harder. That makes it a lot harder because I'd say 50% of people aren't going to say yes to this. At least 50% of people aren't going to say yes to this.
Yeah, but I think you underestimate the desperation of some people, though, too. Like they would. And I also think you underestimate how many people think they're tough and they're not.
And they've never fought, ever.
There's a lot of people who've watched a lot of movies and think they can knock someone out with one punch.
That's fair.
And I've experienced that. So, like, it's I'd still take the bet. All right. Nice. What do we got? We snuck in another long one here, boys. I thought it was good though. That was a great topic with Mauricio. I think we hit all the important things on jobs, even though we didn't go through the entire agenda that was laid out. Good episode. We all gonna be back next week.
Yep. It's my daughter's birthday next week, but I'm going to be here. That's how committed I am.
Oh, you are committed. I like that. Is AJ? Are you back next week?
Next week. Then I'm gone after that.
Okay. Plugs. Do we got plugs? Mauricio, you got something?
Yeah, if you were interested in the last topic, then Elite Syndicator Inner Circle. We do this every week. I do a little keynote and Q&A. We've been talking a lot about this lately, especially on stuff that happens after you close. So if you're interested, go to coachingwithmauricio.com.
Actually, I have one scenario where I'm an LP in something and there's some shady stuff going on, and I might just show up and ask you that question.
You got to pay though.
Well, you're not going to let me in for free for the.
You might get
It's a good question. It's a good scenario. AJ, what do you got?
All right, let me think here. We got tons going on. You know what? We've got some deals we're raising.
Oh.
So go
you
check
got
it
a lot
out.
going on. You got your tech fund.
We got our tech fund.
You got a deal you're raising for.
We've got 2 deals, and I'm putting in. So we'll invest 15 plus in the next 6 months. So we'll probably buy 15, 20 deals alongside our investors we're going forward. So
need any pref equity?
I was just going to say that, Jay. You need any pref equity in any of those deals?
We may. So yeah, go to the portal, check out what we've got. what we're raising for.
Nice. Jay, what do you got?
Well, let me start with the congratulations to the team. We closed the land purchase, the first half of our raise in the land purchase for our ground up development outside of Dallas. In a couple of weeks, we're going to start raising for the second part of that, which is going to be the actual build part. So if anybody's going to be interested, I'll talk about that more when we open that up. But feel free to reach out. And
HUD deal too. Like that's like getting to that point with a HUD deal. I think is like we're pretty happy about it. It's anyone who's gone through HUD, it's not the easiest process. So we're hopefully getting to the home stretch with that.
Yep. And I think I'm going to end up going to the Bigger Pockets conference. So anybody out there that's going to go to Bigger Pockets, anybody who wants a ticket, by the way, I can get you a discount on your ticket. Go to conferenceconnect.com.
AJ, Mauricio, you guys both going to Bigger Pockets?
It's in Vegas. Yeah. I don't know if I'm staying there the whole time. I'm going there for part I'm in.
Yeah. But if anybody wants 10% off their ticket to join us, go to conferenceconnect.com and you can get 10% off.
Jay, can I be your plus one?
That's 100%.
Well, if the three of you are going, then I should probably go, right?
Your wife can't get you in?
I should probably could. I don't know.
She has another plus one.
She's got a whole. Yeah, I love the fact that she's got a little girl squad. That when I say little girl, she's got a small squad of girls that they're super tight and they all stay together. And she when you make a joke, she did as a plus one. She has like a plus four where like they all hang out and they have fun. So I love the fact that she's got that, in the industry. That's kind of like this podcast. It's kind of giving you you're my little boy squad.
Yeah.
All right, I do have one plug, and I'm going to go off the tradition. I usually plug my wife on every Tuesday night. I plug my wife, but my wife gave me permission to plug Jay's wife tonight.
Nice.
So I'm going to plug Jay's wife tonight because we got this thing in the mail.
Oh, see, I wanted to hold this off because I was going to do something with the group here. We were going to do like
do you want me to stop? Do you want to keep the suspense or
yeah, let's hold off.
Oh, Jay,
I want all the guys. So yeah, you guys got you're my partner, so you got the super special first week.
Okay, so when you send them something, you have to send it to me again because there's no chance.
Literally, that's the plan. And now that I know AJ is going to be gone for a couple of weeks, it might have to be next week. But
okay,
yeah.
Fair. Yeah. All right, I'm going to plug my wife again. Then she just got back from Limitless. So I guess I plugged your wife and my wife tonight. But
I'm doing the 50 million cage match with you.
I don't know. You guys taking bets on that one? I'm just going to plug my wife. She's got back from Limitless too. So go check out her Instagram. She posted a bunch of fun stuff about Limitless, hanging out with all those people with her girl squad. So go check her out. At Badass Investor Instagram. I don't know. I think she's got YouTube, TikTok, everything. Check it out. All right, guys. I guess we're gonna have to have a really good episode next week if we lose AJ after that. So let's get on our topics this week and get something really, really awesome. But for everyone else, pay attention. Come back next week. We will see you next Thursday.
See you.